On your tables, there's also a little booklet with a lot of developments for investment purposes. So please have a look at those as well. So, ons gaan so 'n bietjie kuier vanaand met Dawie en met Dennis, met D en D. En Dawie, welkom in die Kaap.
Baie dankie.
It's lekker om hier so te hê. We're gonna sort of jump between English and Afrikaans tonight. Is that okay? Karen, is that okay? Thank you.
Ek praat Engels vir selfverdediging.
Dennis het dan hardloop uit soos airtime, verseker. Dawie, ek wil begin by jou. I mean, you're a Pretoria boykie, but where did it all start? Where did you grow up? Where's the roots?
Groot geword in die ou Noord-Transvaal. My vroegste herinneringe was ek lees met bokmelk, die mopani wurms, springkane.
Ja.
Daar is mense wat daai goed eet, regtig. Nou nog kan ek, as ek in die veld loop, kan ek sien daai springkane is 'n eetbare een of nie.
Nee.
So dit is waar ons vandaan gekom het, so dit is maar platlandse agtergrond.
So dis wat Dawie se wortels begrawe is, verseker. Dawie familie, jy het vir ons 'n bietjie vertel. Jy het 'n redelik interessante familie.
Bietjie vreemd. Ja, by die huis, ek het my dogter het haar PhD in genetika. Hulle bly in Holland nou. En sy 2 seentjies, so ek is oupa. En my seun is 'n skelmprokureur in Pretoria. En dan sy 2 10-jarige dogtertjies. En hulle eerste taal is Russies.
Tweeling, nou sy, lekker. Dawie, I had a look at your website, and I mean, you've got a variety of interests. And just listen to this. I mean, he's run a bunch of marathons, including 2 comrades. Jan, he's done 2 Ironmans as well. National Colours for Paragliding, a lifetime member of the Zoological Society, special interest in communism studies. Hy was 'n movie star in 'n movie met die naam van Babbelas. Ons vind alles uit Dawie. A TV presenter, he's been on over 1,000 TV shows and 500 radio broadcasts. On top of being an economist, a well-known and one of SA's foremost economists, served on the South African Reserve Bank as an economist, Institute of Directors member, and so it carries on and carries on. So, Dawie, where do you find the time for all of this? I mean, how do you find balance between work and life and all these other things?
Yeah, I've got a problem, and that is I'm only going to reach probably 110 maybe, if I'm lucky.
Life expectancy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that I really want to do a lot of stuff. So you really have to squeeze stuff into your life. So yeah, I try to do as much as I possibly can.
Do you sleep at all?
Yeah, no, I do. That's a bit of an issue, and I believe people should sleep enough. I don't sleep enough. I go to bed at 10, 11 o'clock or so, and get up at 5.
Yeah.
And then go off to the gym. So this morning I went to the gym.
Well.
And the problem is I need to read a lot, and I've counted actually, and there are ways of counting how much you read. I read more than 10,000 articles a year.
So you read and you don't watch a lot of TV, I presume?
I don't watch TV.
You watch ontbytsaak?
Yeah. Kyk nie ontbytsaak.
Môre ons
Ek het mos nou klaar gesien. Hoekom moet ek
ons is vanaand by aandsake.
So Dawie is I've got to just pronounce this correct, an ichthyologist.
Ichthos is a Greek name for fish.
Yeah.
So I've got a thing about fish, freshwater fish especially. And I've been up in Africa, and I've been to some other lakes as well. The biggest lake in the world, by the way, is the Baikal Lake. And I ran the Baikal Lake when it was frozen in the middle of winter. It was minus 25 degrees. So I've been to the Baikal Lake a couple of times, and I've been to lakes in Africa, and I've collected some fish. I've got a thing about fish.
Well, there's another man that's got a love for fish, so he just catches them.
Yeah, I love fishing, eat it, and, but I don't study them. I catch them and sometimes release them.
Dawie, quite interesting for me when I looked at your website is that you've got an interest in communism studies.
Yeah, that's something interesting. When I grew up in a very conservative household, like I guess most of us. Jy word gesien en nie gehoor nie. You were expected to go to Sunday school, and you will get eventually. You will become part of the church, membership of the church, and then of course there were all the bad things, like for example the rooi gevaar. So everybody told me about the rooi gevaar, communism then, and I asked people, but you know, they told the things that they always tell you at school not to do. Those are the nice things.
That's it.
Dit is rook en drink. Dis lekker goed, jy mag nie lekker.
Dis 'n paar van die manne hier wat
And so they told me about communism, and they said communism is a bad thing, and I tried to, and I asked them why, and nobody could really answer me. So I went to the army to fight communism, and I got into trouble in the army as well because of my views that I had about politics then. And then started studying while I was in the army, and I wanted to know more about communism. And when I did my honors degree, I specifically asked my professors if I could do a course in communism. I had to get special permission because books like from Karl Marx and Sharafa and all those guys were banned. So I had to get special permission to study. So today I'm not a communist, but at least I know why not. If you ask most of the communists in South Africa, they are communist, but they haven't got a clue why they are.
Quite interesting. So you also participated in the Pioneer Rally, assisted by a blind navigator. Dawie actually participated, I think, twice, won it once. And this is a rally that's done in to the benefit of the Pioneer School for the Visually Impaired.
Yeah, I won it with Hein Wagner. Hein Wagner is an amazing guy. Yeah, he was my navigator. I think I've done it 3 times now. One year, Helen Zille won it, by the way. Helen Zille is baie sensitief. Ek weet nie of julle weet nie, maar jy moet nie. Toe sê dit in die jare die, toe sê ek vir, ag man, jy het gekroek. Ons almal weet jy het gekroek. En sy was baie kwaad geweest.
Gee jy vir 'n boekie oor kommunisme?
Nee, Helen Zille het eendag. Ja, ek het dit gewen saam met daai wagter. Dis 'n baie groot, dis baie lekker, 'n wonderlike ervaring.
Ek is seker. Dawie, as ons jou nie by radio hoor of praat oor ekonomie nie, dan sien ons jou op 'n Saterdagoggend op ontbytsake. Nou hoe kom 'n ekonoom by ontbytsake?
Wat gebeur het eendag, ek het radioprogramme in die middag het ek finansiële markte op 'n finansiële program net gesê, vandag het jy rand dit gedoen of dat gedoen of wat ook al. En toe eendag toe die aanbieder nie opgedaag nie op die radioprogram. Toe sê hulle vir my, maar daar's 'n probleem, ek moet nou die program aanbied. En toe sit maar gesukkel, toe bied ek die radioprogram aan. En toe werk dit nou baie lekker. En toe eendag toe bel iemand my van kyk net, toe vra hy vir my of ek 'n finansiële program wil aanbied. Nou, ek kan vir jou 'n lang storie vertel van die eerste program wat ek aangebied het, want dit was absoluut sanitair geweest. Maar ek het dadelik ja gesê en toe het ek begin om die programme aan te bied. En daai eerste dag, eendag as ons tyd het, moet ek jou daai storie vertel. Ons kyk of jy nou 'n bietjie tyd sal oor het, dan sal ek julle die storie vertel. En toe bied ek dit aan, dit is my lekker ervaring geweest, en toe eendag toe kom Jan Joubert, wat destyds die uitvoerende regisseur geweest het van ontbytsake. Toe sê hy wil 'n onderhoud met my doen oor inflasie. Toe sit ek net daar, toe vra hy my, sulke stupid vrae man. Ek weet jy kan sien die ou weet niks. Vra hy vir my, die van inflasie. En toe nou klaar, toe sê vir my, my sien nou, wat nou? Hy sê ja, nee, eintlik was hierdie audisie geweest. Of ek die program wil aanbied. Van toe, dit is nou oor 1000 programme terug, ja.
My vaderland. Ek moet nou 'n paar vrae vra oor inflasie, so hou tyd vas vir my. Dawie, in your spare time, when you're not doing all these other weird other things, you're an economist. But I sometimes think that people look at economists and they think they've got a crystal ball that they've got to look into to find out what's going to happen in the economy and tell all of us some good news. But that's not the case, is it?
Now, being an economist, first of all, is trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And somebody asked an economist once what the impact of the French Revolution was on the French economy. And he replied, "It's too soon to say." So that's more or less how the economy is. I think the thing about the economy is that people think that the job of economists is to predict things, That's not the case. The job of an economist is trying to understand people in the first instance, because economics is about people. It is not about graphs and numbers and formulas and things. It is really about people. And you can do economics about love. You can do economics about happiness. You can do economics about interest rates and about money. It's why people do certain things. And certainly I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If I knew what's going to happen tomorrow, I would have been very, very wealthy. So I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and that is not my job to make predictions. The only reason why I do that is because I follow certain trends, and based on experience and based on some bullshit formulas, to be honest, I try to make predictions on where the rand is going to be. And I can tell you why I think the rand's going to be A, B, and C, whatever. I've got reasons why I say that. But that's really not my job, because I just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Absolutely. So, and we're going to get to those a little bit later, but for now, ek wil bietjie, Dennis, ek wil spring na jou toe. So Dawie is 'n ekonoom, hy bou van die ekonomie en hy hou van allerlei ander goed. En Dennis is 'n eiendomsman. Baie van julle ken vir Dennis. So for those of you that don't know Dennis, his heart and his love is with people and with property. And economists don't always like people that like property, but they differ sometimes, but they...
Dawie het nou net gesê, ek is ook 'n ekonom, so dan is ek definitief 'n ekonom.
Definitief 'n ekonom. Maar Dennis, vertel vir ons bietjie, vir die wat jou nie ken nie, waar het alles begin vir jou in die eiendomme?
Môre, miskien moet ek net eers my storie vertel. Ek is gebore ook in die Oos-Transvaal in Springs. Ek wil amper sê, nadat my pa en my ma my gehad het, vir my en my broer en my suster, het ons getrek na 'n dorpie in Huisville, op die Valdam. En my pa en my ma is daar so in 1989 geskei. En toe het ons Kaap toe getrek. En my ma het ons alleen groot gemaak, vir my broer en my suster. Op 14 jaar het ek al gewerk as 'n petroljoggie om geld te maak, sodat ons kon help vir ons huishouding, en ons het baie swaar getrek. En die een ding wat ek vandag kan sê is, ek wil nooit weer so intoe gaan nie. Dit is my why in my lewe. En ons het toe daai jare Kaap toe getrek, en my ma se broer en haar suster, hulle het basies ons ingeneem. So by so dat ek vandag nog het ek regtig 'n verhouding met my pa nie, en hy is nog steeds in ons lewe, maar as gevolg van daai tye en dit wat gebeur het ons nooit regtig 'n verhouding met hom gebou nie. So ons het regtig arm groot geword, daai jare. Toe is ek was in 'n klomp skole, en na skool het my ma vir my ook gesê, luister hierso my seun, hier is die geld vir jou om te gaan leer. Buiten dit was ek in elk geval nie baie lief om te leer nie. So dit was nie my eerste passie om te gaan leer nie. En na skool het my ma gesê, luister hierso, maar my pa was in die gevangenisdiens, en daai nou vandag die korrektiewe dienste, en sy het toe gesê, maar luister hier, miskien moet jy ook maar in die gevangenisdiens gaan werk. Ek is toe bewaarder geraak. Ek was 7 jaar daar van my lewe, en ek moet sê, ek het elke dag wat ek daar was, het ek het gehad. Ek het dit gehad met 'n passie. Ek het binne in die tronk vir die eerste paar jaar gewerk van my lewe, en daarna is ek oorgeplaas Kaapstad korrektiewe toesig toe, en daarna Bellville korrektiewe toesig toe, en Meising pelle ontmoet, waarvan ek vandag nog pelle is, van hulle is vanaand hierso. En toe daarna, na 7 jaar het ek my vrou ontmoet, en toe ek my vrou ontmoet, het ek 'n geleentheid gekry om in die eiendomsmark in te gaan. Ek het toe begin werk vir Excelmore Eiendomme, en ek het toe, ons het vir 3 jaar daar gewerk, waarna ek en my vrou ons eie eiendomsbesigheid begin het, Dan Property Services, uit ons huis uit in Brackenfell. En daarna het ons het daai besigheid gehad vir 14 jaar. 14 jaar het ons eie besigheid gehad, en toe het ons die geleentheid gehad om die Hakots franchise in die noordelike voorstede te koop, wat ek toe gedoen het, ja. So daai is basies my agtergrond en van waaraf ek kom, ja.
It's a great story. Dennis's mom and his brother and his sister are all here tonight. So what a beautiful story, Dennis. So give them a hand. Dennis, currently you run the Denis franchise in the northern suburbs, but your group of companies looks a lot different. Just give us a bit of background of what it entails.
Yeah, so when I bought the franchise, and obviously with a lot of help from attorneys and tax advisors, I realized that I'm busy going down the drain. I started buying property and I invested a lot in property, although at that time I already owned a lot of properties. And I realized that I was making a big mistake. Actually, if I go back a little bit, in 2008, I nearly lost everything because I didn't have the right structures in place. And I realized when I bought this franchise that I had to put everything, I had to go back and put the right structures in place. And what we did is we started a group of companies, and out of the group of companies, we currently do second-hand sales. We've got a development department that help developers do feasibility studies, help them put together projects, help them with the sales of that projects. We also have shareholding in a Mauritian company, where we also help people with tax structures and to invest in Mauritius. We have a rental department where we do rentals for owners who invest with us. We have plus minus over 1,000 properties that we manage for owners in the northern suburbs of Cape Town. So we started that structures, and then obviously our properties also falls into that group structure. So and that's what we established, and soos julle kan hoor is my Engels nie baie goed nie, maar ek gaan nou sommer oorslaan in Afrikaans toe, dit is baie makliker. So ons het toe daai besighede begin, en die belangrikste ding was dat ek in 2008 het ek amper my alie gesien as gevolg van nie die regte strukture te gehad het nie. En toe ons toe ons die regte strukture in plek het toe COVID kom en dit moeilike tye was, het ek besef dat dit was die regte besluit om die goed in die regte strukture te gaan sit, want obviously het ek al my bates gehad en niemand kon my bates gevat het nie. Want die belangrike ding is daai bates op 'n eendag wat ek opgebou het oor jare se tyd. Ja, so dis maar net.
I always say to people, if you do one property transaction, it actually triggers a lot in the economy. I mean, you've got bond originators, you've got banks that get involved, you've got architects sometimes, you've got skelm prokureur, wat moet deel raak van dit. Sorry, julle is 'n paar van hulle hier vanaand. But there's a lot that happens from one property transaction, but one of the key sort of individuals in that transaction is the estate agent, dis die agent. En Dennis, mense dink, dis mos 'n maklike job. Jy hou dit 'n bietjie min vir baie geld. Is dit regtig so?
Nee, dit is verskriklike harde werk. Ek was vir jare lank self 'n eiendomsagent, ek het self daar begin. Ek het self baie eiendom al my lewe verkoop. Ek bly maar 'n salesman uit en uit. Die ontwikkelaars wat hier is, wat my ken, weet, ek hou daarvan om eiendomme te verkoop en te swaai. Maar dit is verskriklike harde werk. Jy moet, om vandag 'n eiendomsagent te wees, is nie net jy raak 'n eiendomsagent nie. Jy moet ook 'n eksamen skryf, jy moet jou NQ4 eksamen gaan doen, jy moet jou PDE eksamen gaan doen, Professional Designation Examination, wat jy moet gaan doen om 'n eiendomsagent te raak. Om vandag eiendomme te bemark is nie meer maklik nie. Dis nie soos vroeër jare nie. Jy moet regtig, dit kos geld om eiendomme te bemark. Jy moet redelik baie geld insit om jou kliënte se eiendomme te bemark. Die agente moet die eiendomsmark ken. Hulle moet weet wat om vir daai kliënt aan te bied, hoe om dit aan te bied, wat die voordele en die nadele is. Ja, en daar's 'n sekere klompie goed wat hulle moet vir die kliënt moet beskikbaar stel. Daar is goed soos FIC wat baie verander het in die laaste paar jare. Die Financial Intelligence Center Act, wat's dit in Afrikaans word, nee? In elk geval
FICA in Afrikaans.
FICA, ja, so FICA. So daai tipe van goed is baie belangrik om 'n eiendomsagent vandag te wees. Dis nie so maklik nie. Dis regtig harde werk, dis lang ure. Ons agente werk naweke, laat aande, laat ure. Jy weet, 'n eiendomsagent kom nie voor 9:00 in die aand by die huis nie. Hy werk van die oggend, as jy dink die agente werk net in die aande, hulle werk tot laat in die aande. So om 'n agent te wees is regtig harde werk.
Thank you, Dennis. Dawie, I want to come back to you, and we want to get a little bit serious now. We need to talk about the economy. And Dawie, it seems that we're in trouble, are we?
By deep. No, we are. The South African economy is in really very deep trouble. Where can I start? Okay, let's start with the local authorities. More than 70% of the local authorities are financially basically bankrupt. The state-owned enterprises have been run into the ground financially and operationally mostly. Eskom is only one example of that. The national accounts of the Minister of Finance is totally unsustainable. So the debt level of the state is this year currently around about 70% to 72% of GDP. We're probably going to end the year at 75% of GDP and next year at about 80% of GDP. Something that is good, and that is we are in a transition phase. We're in a process of getting rid of the ANC. So we are pretty much the same. Where we are today is where we were about 30 years ago. And it's not easy. No transition is easy. The ANC is still going to be in government after the election, but a much weaker ANC. And in 5 years' time, hopefully we will get rid of them completely. But in the meantime, the next 5 years is going to be really tough. The ANC government is the most destructive force the South African economy has ever seen. And it's important to understand politics, and I've got my own views on what I think is going to happen to politics over at the next year's election. We can talk about that if you want to. Yeah. But the challenges are significant, and the damage has been caused by the ANC government mostly, and they're not going to fix it.
But let's talk about that election, because a lot of people saying coalitions are the way forward. Is that your view?
Well, yes, I guess, but coalitions in South Africa do not have a very good track record. I think what's going to happen in the election, the ANC is going to get round about 50, maybe just above 50 or just below 50, somewhere there. I know what the DA says, but the ANC is going to get round about 50. That means if they get 52, it's business as usual, for example, or 51 or 50. If they get just below 50%, and I think that's what they're going to get, between say 45 and 50, I think that's the most likely scenario. It will be relatively easy for the ANC to form a coalition with the smaller political parties. Some of the smaller ones like Good, because Patricia is a party. Yeah. And Patricia is a veel gat jakkal, so.
Wat is die definisie van dit?
Nou kyk bietjie waar was sy nou oor. Sy was al heel links en heel regs geweest. Patricia, ek moet sê sy's oral. Jy net vir haar job ergens en sy's daar. So anyway, so the ANC is probably going to be in power with the help of a couple of smaller coalition parties. If they get below 45%, then it really starts getting very interesting. Before I get to that, I just want to make a very important comment. Remember, the ANC is probably going to get less than 50% in Gauteng. And the leadership in Gauteng are quite close to the EFF. And they may be forced to go into a coalition with the EFF in Gauteng. And then the EFF may have certain demands on national level. So what happens in the provinces are important as well. A second point that is important, the worse the ANC fares in the election, the more likely the chance that they will get rid of our sleeping president. Because it's the only thing that they can actually sell. So if they get 45%, they're going to recall Squirrel Rampoker. Okay. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But if the ANC gets below 45%, for example, they will be forced into a coalition with either the DA or with the EFF. If the DA goes into coalition with the EFF, that's the end of the DA. I mean, if you play with pigs, you're going to get dirty. That's how it is.
Yeah,
that means strange. That it's not impossible that our next president is going to be Paul Mashatile, what's he called? The Don from Alex. Paul Mashatile, and our deputy could be Julius Malema.
Interesting.
That is possible. I don't think that's the most likely scenario, but it's certainly.
But there is a scenario.
Yeah, there is. But my most likely scenario is for the ANC to still be in power, just below 50% with a smaller political. And that's important because you have to understand what the ANC stands for in terms of ideology. Of course, ideology determines what your policies are going to be. Now, the ideology of the ANC, actually the ANC does not have an ideology. There are a couple of ideologues, like, for example, Pravin Gordhan, the worst Minister of Finance this country has ever seen. He's caused so much damage. I don't think he had his fingers in the cookie jar. Who knows? But I don't think so. But he was a horrible Minister of Finance. And the reason is because his ideology is he's a communist. And there are a couple of other ones, like for example, Patel is also a real communist. So they are the real ideologues. But for the rest in the ANC, they're just a bunch of incompetent crooks, mostly.
So if we do get these coalitions, how easy would it be to formulate policy and actually
That's the issue. That's the issue. Why if the ANC and the DA goes into a coalition, as an example, so what's the ideology going to be? So that is the question. What is the ideology going to be? And that's important. You have to believe in a God. You have to believe in something, because if you don't believe in something, you don't know what rules to make. And those rules are called policy. So that is, I think, like I've said, if you play with pigs, you're going to get dirty. It will be a crucial mistake for the DA to go in a coalition with the ANC.
And obviously, I mean, all of that might have a massive impact on the economy.
Usually. So for the next 5 years, we're going to have an ANC. In one way or the other, the ANC is still going to be in government. So the next 5 years is going to be a very difficult one. If you see what's been happening the last couple of years in South Africa, it's just, I can give you all the numbers. Unemployment levels and poverty levels and weak economic growth and increased.
All of those.
Yeah, all of those bad things have been happening. And you cannot tell me it's going to get better with a new ANC. It will be, at best, it will be more of the same.
Dawie, the state of an economy, or the health measurement for the economy is normally GDP. And you've got a way of explaining economy in a very sort of layman's terms. Maybe just for all of us, just explain GDP, or gross domestic profit.
Yeah, economists, even today, they don't agree on what should be included in GDP. Let me give you, are there any kids here tonight? Let me give you this one, it's an interesting one. So what's GDP? It's a gross domestic product, it's your total production of goods and services in your economy. That's what GDP is. But what's the definition of GDP? What should be included, what should be excluded? Now let me give you one example. And again, julle het mos hier so streelpaleis hier so in Kaapstad julle. But you know, dance academy. Now, this is regtig so. Dis ernstige goed hierdie waaroor ons praat. So as if you go to one of those places and you make use of the services of one of those, you know, then that is actually part of GDP, because a service is rendered.
Yeah.
Okay, and you pay for that. But if you marry her, that's not part of GDP anymore.
So it gets complicated.
Really, that is an actual fact. That is an actual fact.
En jy kry skoonmaak.
So, but let me explain it in simple terms. Okay, let's explain it in simple terms. So it's the total production of goods and services in your economy during a certain, usually within a year. Say for example, you're a farmer and you only farm with millies and you produce 100 bags of millies in 1 year. Then that farm's total production of gross domestic product is 100 bags of millies.
So
that's basically
what it is. So
usually what we do, we measure things we measure it in rands.
Yeah.
And we add it all up together, and that's the GDP then.
So our GDP contracted at the sort of the last quarter of last year. In the first quarter of this year, we actually grew by, I think, 0.4%, what I could find. Is that a good sign? Are we?
No. The population in South Africa is expanding at a rate of about 1.2%. So the population is growing. It's growing at a slower rate, by the way, but the population growth is about 1.2% per year. So if you have the total GDP, the total production of goods and services in the economy divided by the number of people, then you get the per capita GDP, of the per kop GDP.
Yeah.
And if the number of people are getting more faster than the size of your economy, then on a per capita basis you're getting poorer. And for the past 10 years, most of the past 10 years, we've been getting poorer in South Africa. So the population is growing at about 1.2. My expectations for economic growth this year is going to be less than 0.5%. So we are going to get poorer again. And if you want to really create jobs for various reasons, if you really want to create jobs, you need to grow the economy at least 3%, but preferably at 4, 5, or 6%. Because there's also a margin of productivity increase. So if the population increased by 1%, and there's a 1% productivity increase actually, for example, then you need to grow the economy much faster than that before you can really bring unemployment levels down.
So we recently signed a 41 billion rand trade agreement with China, just a couple of weeks ago, apparently. So, and that obviously, it sounds good, it sounds great. Is that going to mean a lot for us to change some of this?
Yeah. Now, China is very important to South Africa. It's our single most important trading partner.
Yeah.
So we trade a lot with China, and you measure trade by measuring how much you export to them and how much you import from them. You add that together, that's your trade with that specific country. But there are other major economic blocks that are also important to us. The Europeans are very important, the Brits are very important, and the Americans, they are very important as well. The Russians, by the way, is a tiny, the trade with the Russians is $1 or $2 billion or so. It's really not much. So the Chinese are very important in terms of trade, but the Chinese are not important in terms of investments. There the Europeans and the Americans are much more important. So the Europeans and Americans, they trade a lot, but they also invest a lot in South Africa. So yes, the Chinese are important, but the West is still far more important than the Chinese.
So, China is a great trading partner for us in terms of raw materials. I mean, they import a lot of our raw materials, and the economy has slowed down a lot. So what does that mean for us?
Not good, because the commodity cycle came down quite a lot. I made a comment about the state fiscal balances that are in trouble. The state debt levels are very... Last year, because of the nice commodity cycle, the Minister of Finance collected about 50 billion rand extra by way of taxes because of the strong commodity cycle. Now, what's been happening in the last couple of months, commodity prices have been coming down, and because of things like, say, for example, weaker growth in China. And on top of all of that, we've destroyed the railroads, so we can't get the stuff out, and we've destroyed the harbours as well. We can't get the stuff out. And commodity prices are low.
And the roads are going as well.
Yeah, and so the Minister of Finance's collection on taxes is going to be and he is under tremendous pressure. The slowdown in commodity prices is certainly not good for South Africa. Depending what kind of commodities. Of course, our most important import product is oil, and the oil price has been going up. Most of commodity prices have been going down, but the oil price has been going up. So this is what we call a double whammy for us. So we earn less from what we export, but we pay more for what we import.
So let's get to what hits our pocket directly, and that's interest rates. Are we at the top of the cycle? I mean, we didn't see an increase now.
Until about 2 weeks or so ago, I thought that we are close to the upper turning point on interest rates. I can just make the comment. Yeah. Remember, you can't just look at one thing. You're talking about interest rates, for example, and of course we can talk about interest rates, but remember, everything is interconnected in your economy. So the reason why we have high inflation in South Africa is not because of the rand only or because of the oil price only. It's a combination of various things working together, a number of factors working together. The bottom line is the South African economy is not very competitive. It's not a very competitive macroeconomic environment that we have because we don't have electricity, because the railroads are not working properly, because of the local authorities are collapsing, because it's a dangerous place. You're getting killed here and all that. So the macroeconomic environment is not very conducive to economic growth in a very competitive environment. The Reserve Bank is part of that, and Lesetja Kganyago is doing a really, really good job by increasing interest rates. And it's painful, it's damaging to the economy. Nobody wants interest rates to go up, but that's all we have left because government failed us on all these other sort of things. So I think with the rand suddenly coming under some pressure recently and with the oil price going up, I'm afraid it could be another increase in interest rates. But I think we are very close to the upper turning point on interest rates. But I must say also, so I expect interest rates perhaps to go up a little bit more, maybe 25 pips or maybe another 50 pips. And with a bit of luck, we can see interest rates coming down early next year, or maybe even the end of this year. It's not impossible. But my outlook for the next 2 or 3 years is not that rosy, because of the high levels of state debt, that will lead to inflation as well. So remember, inflation erodes the value of money, but inflation also erodes the value of debt. And the only institution that gains with high levels of inflation are those ones that owe money. And the biggest debtor in South Africa is the state.
It's the state, yeah.
So the politicians like high inflation, because high inflation erodes the value of state debt.
Dawie, you mentioned the Reserve Bank now, and like you said, they're doing a good job. They're using the tool that they've got to control inflation. But There's been much said about the independence of the Reserve Bank, and it seems like the state wants to get their hand on that. Why is it important for them not to do it?
Yeah, well, for exactly the reason I've just mentioned. If the politicians are in control of the Reserve Bank, they will, in fact, Frikkie Mbalula, okay? Fikile Mbalula, or we could call him Fikile Einstein, some people call him that. So, Fikile Mbalula, about a month or so ago, he said that the Reserve Bank should change the mandate to a dual mandate and blah, 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 blah. So clearly, people that don't understand what it. The thing is that the central bank is, the central banker is appointed by the president of the country, by the state president, and it's not an elected official, and which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because your central bank, in terms of the South African constitution and in terms of many other countries in the world, their constitution, your central bank is independent as far as policy are concerned. So that means that the central bank can change interest rates as they see fit, and they have a mandate, and a mandate is make sure inflation stays between 3 and 6%. So we're there, or close to that now at the moment. I don't think it's going to stay there, it's going to pop out again. But that's the the Minister of Finance sets that mandate, by the way. But if you leave the management of the Reserve Bank to politicians, imagine what politicians are going to do right before an election now. They're going to cut interest rates.
Yeah.
And that's why it needs to be independent.
Yeah.
Just for interest sake, I'm a shareholder in the South African Reserve Bank. So the South African Reserve Bank is a privately held company. It belongs, it's got private shareholders. I do get a dividend from the South African Reserve Bank. My total dividend annually is about 8 rand a year from my 200 shares. So the reason why I am a shareholder in the South African Reserve Bank is because I get invited to the annual general meeting, and there they give you quite nice wine and biltong as well. But apart from that, they give you some financial, they give you a lot of information. As an economist, it's important for me to be there and get this information, but I have no say whatsoever on monetary policy as a shareholder.
At all. So let's talk a little bit about electricity. I mean, I tried to find some information about electricity, and I spoke to a friend of mine who sent me this graph, and he said that Morgan Stanley, in their research, they looked at Eskom's capacity, and according to them, if you guys can get that graph up first, it will be great. But it looks like Eskom's capacity is going to be under strain for the next couple of years, and the private sector has jumped in. Obviously, rooftop solars, private PV plants, all these things are on the cards. But are we not being too pessimistic about that?
No. What is happening to the state-owned enterprises? They're dying.
Yeah.
They're just coming to an end. They're dying. And in a very kind of way, the ANC government, which is a socialist, communist kind of funny creature on the left somewhere, they have privatized more things in South Africa than what Margaret Thatcher ever could hope to privatize. And I can give you many examples. We are in the process of privatizing the post office. Of course, that's not official policy.
Yeah.
But the post office is simply coming to an end. And it's exactly the same is going to happen. It's happened to South African Airways already, and a couple of other ones. So the same is going to happen to Eskom. Remember, Eskom consists of 3 parts. The generation part, where they make the electricity. The transmission part, the part that do these huge pylons.
Yeah.
And the distribution part, the last mile. Now, that huge pylons, or the transmission part, that's a natural monopoly. Now, a natural monopoly is like a highway.
Yeah.
You can't really compete with the highway, because then you have to build another highway right next to it, and it doesn't make sense. So that's an example of a natural monopoly. And that will probably remain in the hands of the state. But the generation part and the distribution part is already being privatized. In fact, there are many court cases where the local authorities, they collect money for Eskom, but then they steal the money, and the money doesn't end up with Eskom. And that's why the local authorities owe about 80 billion rand to Eskom.
Yeah.
So what happens now is that the private sector simply takes that over, and the companies can pay directly to Eskom. So the final distribution part is being outsourced, and the local authorities will lose even more revenue now, because they can't steal that money now. It's not available to them anymore. On the generation part, the private sector is also starting to generate their own electricity. Now, it's not all bad news. Of course, the process is quite painful quite often. But if you compare today to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, if you use 100 units of electricity to produce 100 units of GDP, then today we use 100 units of electricity to generate 135 units of GDP.
Sure.
So that means, and I've calculated roughly, we had a 20% increase in electricity productivity, if you can put it that, and about the rest is an increase in terms of more electricity generated by the private sector as well. So my answer is Eskom is going to come to an end. It will come, except for the transmission part, and the private sector will just take over that. And that is what's happening all over in the economy mostly.
That's well. So het klink vir my, ons moet ons safety belts vasmaak vir die volgende paar jaar. So Dennis, ek wil terugkom na jou toe, gegewe die ekonomie en die mark waar ons was, of die mark waar ons is, wat gebeur in die eiendomsbedryf? Het julle gesien die mark staan stil, stadiger?
Bonnie, ek is so bly wat Dawie gesê het, dat daar's meer mense, want hulle het eiendomme nodig om in te bly. Hulle kom hier almal by my.
Hy's 'n salesman, né?
Hulle kom bly by my. Dawie, het jy eiendomme? Wat sê jy?
Daar's nie plek vir jou nog mense daar.
So ja, Morne, ons het definitief gesien dat die mark het definitief bietjie gestabiliseer, die mark het afgekom, ek stem 100% saam met Dawie. Die rentekoerse, ek voel ook dieselfde oor die rentekoerse wat gaan obviously miskien volgende jaar, hopelik volgende jaar gaan begin afkom. Ons sien ook dat kliënte wat in die mark is huise wat ons moet verkoop, realisties moet wees met hulle pryse. Die huise verkoop nog steeds. Die mark bepaal daai eiendom se pryse op die ou end van die dag. Dis nie die kliënt wat daai prys bepaal nie. Daar is nog steeds 'n kliënt vir daai eiendom. Dit is definitief iets wat ons gesien het, maar iets wat Dawie gesê het is die mense raak meer, en wat ek agtergekom het is, en ek is baie passievol daaroor, is dat daai mense kom hier by my, so totdat dit so sleg gaan dat ek hoef te trek. By the way, as jy dan nou wil trek, het ons 'n tak in Mauritius, ons kan vir julle eiendom in Mauritius verkoop. Maar vir nou, terwyl ons nog in Suid-Afrika gaan bly, en ons is positief oor wat nog gaan gebeur, koop eiendom in Suid-Afrika, verhuur dit uit, dat jy hier by jou kom hier. Ons kan verseker vir jou daar so ook help, no problem.
We make a plan. Dennis, so with interest rates on the up and people struggling to pay debt, obviously a lot of people can't afford to buy. So what's the rental market like? Probably strong?
The rental market is very strong at this stage. We've seen it gone up quite a lot in the last few months and the last year. Obviously through COVID, we saw that because of the interest rates went down, the rental the type of rental clients, the tenants that we got was bad tenants. So we had a lot of bad debt after COVID, but because the interest rates are now going up, we're getting much better quality tenants in those properties. So there's definitely a rise on the type of tenant that you get on your properties. I see it on my own properties that I rent out. Just last week, a property that I rented for 10,000 Rand a month, the rental came to an end. We pushed the rental right up to 13,500 Rand a month. So the rental demand is high. So I still believe in property as an investment, although obviously it's a difficult time in South Africa. I'm positive that things will change. Hopefully, like Dawie said, and I'm also listening to this stuff, that hopefully in the next 5-10 years things will change. But I still believe, do you know there's a stat? I actually went and looked at it tonight, that 96% of South Africans can never retire. 96%. Can you retire? You sit here tonight. I'm 48 years old. I can retire. If I wanted to. My wife actually spoke to me the weekend about that again. I can actually retire because I started buying properties at a young age. Yes, I made a lot of mistakes, but I still bought a lot of properties, and today they pay me dividends, and the capital of that properties, they still increase in value. They still increase in value. We've bought properties last year in Stellenbosch that grown quite a lot in value. We bought properties 3 years ago here in Kuils River. We bought 5 investment properties, and they're already worth much more. The tenants are paying the bonds. We also gear those properties. But as you can hear, Dawie, I'm a property guy. So I still believe in properties, and I think the thing is, those properties will give you a great income in the future to come. So I'm a lot for investment properties and buying properties for investment.
Dennis, UBA's July report shows close to 35% of the applications received was for investment properties. Are you seeing similar?
100%. We had an investor in a development weekend this weekend. The last weekend we did a massive roadshow here in the northern suburbs, and I would say about 90% of those clients that came to visit us was all clients who wanted to invest in properties. I still believe property is one of the best investment classes in the if you want to go and invest your money, you have to have money to go and invest in an asset class. Property, you can use the bank's money to go bond that property. And that's how I created my wealth over the years. I've used the bank's money to obviously bond those properties. Some of my properties are now paid off. I've got equity in those properties that I can use to buy more properties. I do that. When my daughter went to college about 3 years ago, I bought a car for her. I used the equity in my property to buy that car for her. My tenant is paying that property. That car. My tenant is paying for that car at the end of the day. Is that onwettig? It's my money, Dawie. But in any case, so yeah, I like property, and I think property is definitely still a great investment class. And if you want to find out more, yeah, you're more than welcome to contact me.
Dawie, ek wil spring na jou toe oor investments. Ek weet ek noem voel baie keer bietjie anders oor die goed, maar voordat ek daar uitkom, Efficient Groep. Hoe dit begin?
So 20 jaar terug is ek die tweede keer gefire in my lewe. 2 keer gefire. En ek en 'n vriend van my het 'n besigheid begin in my huis. Ons sê hy het so 16 miljoen rand bestuur. Ja, maar dit is wat dis nie, jy kan nie daar in die lewe maak. 16 miljoen rand het hy bestuur, en ek het baie geskryf en ek het goeders gedoen. En so af en toe geld gekry daarvoor. En toe moet ons eendag ons huidige hoofuitvoerende beampte het ek hom ontmoet, en hy het 'n soortgelyke ding gedoen by hulle huis. Ook in hulle sitkamer, en ons het die twee goeders bymekaar gesit, en dis is waar die Efficient Groep vandaan kom. So, en ek en hy het die wêreld plat gery, en ons het mense se geld gehaal, en die mense geld gevat en belê en bestuur en so aan. En vandag het ons so wat 620 jaar terug. Ons het nou 600 mense wat vir ons werk. Ons is verantwoordelik vir oor die 300.000 miljoen rand wat bates wat ons onder bestuur het. Ons het seker so 70 takke of so deur die land. So ja, dis waar die besigheid vandaan kom.
Yeah. Incredible story, yeah? I mean, how many small businesses started out of garages and homes? You think about Harley Davidson, Google, Apple, all these guys. So Dawie, well done. Ek was gee vir Dawie aan. So Dawie, if I have to ask you, what should a personal investment portfolio look like? I mean, what would your personal one, mine, for that?
Okay, what should an investment portfolio look like? It always depends on the individual, because you have to build a portfolio around the individual. But here are a couple of pointers. The typical thing, well, diversify. Make sure you've got a diversified portfolio. In the case of South Africa, make sure a substantial part of your assets are invested abroad. Laat ek dit weer 'n keer sê, vat van jou geld die land uit.
Wat se persentasie is? Ek vir ander restrikte
wat dit is, dit hang wie jy is, weet ek.
Ja, weer eens.
Dit hang wie jy is. As jy oud is, jy's 95 jaar oud en jy het 1 miljoen rand, dan bring alles terug. Byvoorbeeld. Maar as jy 20 jaar oud is en jy het 20 miljoen rand by jou oupa geërf, so vat alles uit.
Ja.
So dit hang op wie jy is. But make sure that a substantial portion of your assets are invested abroad. Talking about investments abroad, nou het daar nog verwys. And it is crucially important to make sure that you have the right structures. You must have the right structures. Yes, take a penny million rand and put it in a bank account. In Mauritius, for example, and something should happen to you, you're going to have so much trouble trying to get that money back.
100%.
So make sure your structures are right. That's very important. But be overweight offshore. That's what I like. And for the rest, be diversified and so on. And just a comment about risk. People say, I don't want to take risk. And if you don't want to take risk, that by not wanting to take risks, quite often you take more risk. You have to take risk. Risk does not mean finding a big hot tub in a bar in the evening. That's not what risk is. Risk has got a different meaning. Risk means it's an asset that keeps on changing value quite a lot. And that's fine. And that's typically what certain certain assets do. They go up and down a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. Take risk. Of course, it's got to be, you have to calculate the risk that you're prepared to take. Go to a good financial advisor. One of our good financial advisors are here tonight. So go to a good financial advisor and get him to try to determine what your risk profile is. So my advice is to take your money out, make sure the right structures, make sure that you have a properly diversified portfolio, just the normal stuff.
And if you're 20 years old or 25 years old, you've got a lot of runway left. I mean, it probably looks different for somebody than
if you're 20 years old, you're 20 you're young, try to shoot the lights out. Really, go for high risk stuff.
Yeah.
Again, don't be stupid. But the younger you are, the more risk you can and should take, and the older you are, the less risk. The classic theory tells you that if you're young, you invest in very volatile stuff, like for example on the JSE, you invest in stocks, for example, and less in bonds. But as you get older, for example, you go more into interest-bearing stuff and less into more volatile kinds of assets. So it really depends. But that's the theory. But I personally, what I do, I make use of our asset management to look after my money as well. And my instruction to them always is shoot the lights out. I like risk.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes you don't sleep well, but I like risk because it's been proven so many times that the more risk you take, the better your upside is.
In the long term, it works. Dennis, do you only believe in property investment or some other stuff as well? That Dawie's
I agree with Dawie. I don't have only property. I believe in being diversified. I also have money offshore. I also have the right structures in place. So definitely, I like what Dawie said here. Being diversified is very important. I'm saying yes, invest in property, but being diversified. If you've got cash money and you can invest it with a good financial advisor is very important. You need to do that. I also believing in taking high risk. I'm also a high risk guy. I like taking the risk. So I totally agree with Dawie. And I always say, use the right people to help you at the end of the day. You can't do it on your own. You need professional people to do the job for you. You can't use a mechanic to do a fit out of your office. It's not the same thing. Or you can't be a doctor and be an estate agent at the same time. It's not going to work. I can't be a doctor. I can't fix you.
We're close to the end. I want to close off, but Dennis, Dawie, I've got two questions for both of you. Dennis, what's been your best investment?
My wife. Yeah, that as well, yeah, definitely. She's not here tonight, but it's totally true. I think the thing is, one of my great investments is always believing in property and investing. But the one best investment was to invest in myself. Reading books, learn more, always want to learn more, read a lot of books, go to courses, and invest in yourself. That was the best thing that I ever did. Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to be where I am today. That's mine.
Dawie, same question for you. What was your best investment?
Ja, in die mense lewe is daar 'n paar beleggings wat jy moet maak en dit is heeltemal stem ek moet saam. Jou belangrikste en jou grootste belegging wat jy maak is om jouself te belê.
Ja.
Dit beteken jy moet vaardighede aanleer, jy moet 'n netwerk skep, jy moet dit is jou grootste en belangrikste belegging. Jou tweede belangrikste belegging wat jy moet doen is om in jou eie besigheid te belê. Belê in jou eie besigheid. En dan die derde belangrikste belegging wat jy gedoen het, as daai besigheid nou gewerk het, vat jy gedeelte van die geld en gee vir iemand anderster om namens jou nou geld te kyk.
Ja.
En dis die volgorde waar jy dit doen. En dis presies wat ek gedoen het. Ek het probeer om vaardighede aan te leer en ek het belê in my eie besigheid en nou is ek in 'n posisie vandag waar ek van my geld vir iemand anders kan gee en sê kyk jy na my geld. En onthou nou net, as jy jou geld vir iemand anders gee en sê kyk jy na my geld, dan gaan hy nie so goed doen soos jy nie.
Ja.
Want in jou besigheid ken jy jou eie besigheid, jy vat hoë risiko's, jy kry baie beter opbrengste. En dit is, jy gee nie jou geld vir iemand anders omdat jy goeie opbrengste wil kry nie. Jy gee nie vir iemand anders jou geld omdat jy wil hy moet jou ryk maak nie. Hy moet jou net ryk hou.
Dis al. En jy moet dit dop. Dis al. Wel dan Dawie. Dan die laaste vraag, Dennis, laaste woord van advies vir die mense hierso.
Ja, soos ek nou voorheen gesê het, is gebruik professionele mense. As jy eiendomme koop en jy wil daai eiendom byvoorbeeld uitverhuur, moet dit nie self doen nie. Ek het dit in die begin vroeër jare, baie jare terug, 28 jaar terug, het ek dit self gedoen. En ek het baie foute gemaak. Ek onthou die eerste keer moes ek en my broer het nog gegaan, ons moes die deure gaan afskroef het van daai eiendom, want hy huurder het my nie betaal nie.
Dis onwettig.
So gebruik, ja, dit is onwettig, jy's reg. Vandag is dit onwettig. Gebruik professionele mense om die werk vir jou te doen. Mense wat die knowledge het. As jy eiendom wil uitverhuur, doen ordentlike credit vetting. As jy 'n huurder wil uitsit, gebruik jy regte mense, die regte advies, die regte soos prokureurs om die werk vir jou te doen. Die regte, as jy met 'n geakkrediteerde agentskap werk, byvoorbeeld, gaan hulle die regte stappe, die regte prosedure volg en daai huurder sal binne 30 tot 40 dae daai eiendom uit wees. As jy 'n eiendom wil koop, gebruik 'n professionele persoon. Hulle gaan leer vandag daarvoor. Hulle sê net soos vroeër jare het jy net 'n eiendomsagent geraak. Dis lankal nie meer so nie. So gebruik professionele mense en dan soos Dawie ook gesê het, gebruik ander mense. Dis die een ding wat ek geleer het is, gebruik ander mense se geld om jouself te verryk op die oomblik van die dag.
Dawie, laaste woord of advice?
Ek het gedink jy gaan my vra of ek van eiendom hou.
Moet ek dit vra?
Ja, ek sê of ek van eiendom hou of nie.
Dis reg.
En ek moet net 'n bietjie wegskuif. Okay, kom ons kyk na die nadele van eiendom. Die transaksiekoste van eiendom is baie hoog. Dit is 'n probleem. Die likwiditeit van eiendom is baie laag. Dit is nie maklik om goeder te koop en verkoop. Nee, dit weet jy, dis hoekom jy so hard werk. Dit is baie moeilik om my geld in te vorder om met die deure gaan afskroef en die geyser breek. Jy weet, dit is groot nadele wat eiendom aanbetref. Jy kan die probleme oorkom deur byvoorbeeld geld te belê in genoteerde eiendom. Dan het jy likwiditeit byvoorbeeld en die transaksiekoste is laer en al uit en jy worry nie oor die geyser. Dis groot nadele wat eiendom aanbetref. Eiendom het 'n aantal voordele. En as jy nie die voordele gebruik nie, dan moet jy nie in eiendom belê nie. Nee, een van die belangrikste voordele van eiendom is jy kan dit keer. So as jy eiendomsbeleggings wil doen, dan moet jy dit keer. Okay, dit is belangrik om te doen. Maar jy moet seker maak die somme maak sin. En jy kan nie gaan leen toe die eiendom of 'n kar vir jou dogter te gaan koop nie, maar dan kan jy die rente aftrek. Dit is onwettig.
Dit is 100%.
So gaan keer die ding.
Ek weet dit
Uitgevang.
gaan leen die eiendom. Nog 'n voordeel van eiendom is eiendom hou gewoonlik pas met inflasie. So dit is gewoonlik 'n voordeel van eiendom. En dan seker die belangrikste enkele voordeel van eiendom, mense moet ernstig lewe, jy moet ernstig bly. En dan die grootste ding is partykeer koop mense kom na my toe en sê vir my het 'n Ferrari gekoop. Dan sê mense maar dis nie 'n goeie belegging nie. Maar wie is ek om vir ou te sê dis 'n goeie belegging om 'n Ferrari te koop? Nee, maar hou van Ferraris. Ek hou van visse. Ek koop die visse en ek koop die fietsse. Dis hoekom mens lewe, om jy lewe tog te geniet. En selfs 'n strandhuis, kan jy die wonderlikste foto's neem van die kinders en so aan. Dis miskien nie 'n goeie belegging nie, maar alles gaan nie net oor geld nie. Dit gaan oor die lewe ook.
En is dit 'n strandhuis?
Nou dat jy weet wat jy antwoord. Ja, okay. So, ja, ek wil net 'n laaste ding sê, jy kan 'n eiendom ook aftrek teen jou belasbare inkomste in die maatskappy waarin jy dit koop. Daar jy weet dit natuurlik, artikel 13(6). En dis die ander ding hoekom ek eiendomme koop, want ek maak my belasbare inkomste minder. So, dis nou 'n lekker gesprek, ek hou daarvan. So, ek het oor die jare het ek ook, dis die ander ding wat ek gedoen het, ek koop eiendom in verskillende entiteite om die belasbare inkomste minder te maak. So, maar ja, Dawie, jy is 100% reg en dankie, dis lekker om so te debatteer oor die goed, ek hou daarvan.
Ek dink dis 'n goeie plek om te stop. Dawie, Dennis. Dennis, dankie. Ons sien uit na die Denis Dunn Investor Club. Dawie, dis 'n voorreg. Dankie vir jou tyd, vir jou insig, vir jou wysheid en ja, ek dink vir dit wat jy vir ons as die gewone man beteken in terme van net om ekonomie vir ons te verduidelik. So ons waardeer. Baie dankie. Kom ons gee 'n hand.
Sê weer? Ja, baie. Ja.